Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Mormon Stories Podcast. I'm your host, John DeLynn. The date is again August 8th. This is my second interview for Monday, August 8th, 2016. This is an ongoing Mormon Stories podcast series about serving a mission in the 2010s in the LDS Church. It's focusing, at least initially, on experiencing a faith crisis while on a mission, early mission return, and those sort of issues, the use of technology and how the church's increased candor in the 2010s may or may not affect missionary service. We've had two interviews so far, and now I'm very excited for our third interview. It's with a gentleman by the name of Mike Woodruff. Mike is joining us from South Jordan, Utah. And just a bit about Mike to help you understand what you're about to listen to. Mike served in the Leeds, England mission for about 3 months in 2013, so about 3 years ago. Some of the elements that are interesting about his story, number one is he was attracted to men prior to his mission. He knew that. So we're going to talk about that and how that affected his decision to go on a mission and what it was like for him to be on a mission while attracted to men as a Mormon. We're going to talk about some abuse he experienced at the hand of a companion on the mission, which led to some post-traumatic stress disorder or PTSD on the mission. We're going to talk about how that maybe contributed to a faith crisis that he had on his mission and his early return because he only served for 3 months on the mission. So really heavy and kind of sensitive topics. So Mike, we're very grateful to have you joining us, not just in audio, but also in video, which we'll share over YouTube. So thanks for joining us, Mike.
Of course.
All right. So give us just a minute about your church life before going on a mission.
Before going on your mission, I was your stereotypical Nazi Mormon. I was very judgmental of others, and I was perfect. And no one could shake my faith in God. And, I was your stereotypical Utah Mormon. I was greater than everyone else, and my relationship with God made me greater than everyone else.
Okay. That sounds heavy. So did you do the seminary thing, release time seminary?
Yes, I got straight A's, and I was a straight A perfect student as well. So
like valedictorian of your high school?
I was Sterling Scholar for Fine Arts.
For the state of Utah?
For my region.
Okay, cool. That's a huge honor. That's super competitive. And you were in a competitive region. So your fine arts were in what type of art?
Theater.
Okay, so you've been interested in theater, like singing, dancing kind of stuff?
Yep.
What were some of the roles you were in high school?
In high school for Beauty and the Beast, I played Gaston's, not like LeFou, but the insane asylum guy.
Okay.
I was also, most of my roles were background, but, I knew how to harmonize really well, so that really worked out for me.
Some of the other musicals, what else, just for fun?
I did
musical theater.
I did Brigadoon, Pajama Game. I did a lot of Shakespearean plays. I did a Neil Simon play, Fools. Mm-hmm. That was really fun too. And then I actually wrote and performed my own monologues for region and got second. In
like speech and drama competitions in high school?
Yeah.
Okay. How many in your family? How many kids?
I have 3 brothers, 4 sisters.
And where are you in the order?
I'm number 5 of 8.
And what about in the order of brothers?
I am the second brother.
Okay, cool. And so devout parents growing up in the church?
Very.
Super devout parents.
They were raised to think that if we weren't in the church that we were failures, and they were failures for not having us in it. So
Okay. So really intense Mormon upbringing, Sterling Scholar, regional finalist or winner in the theater and drama. Okay, so talk a bit about, just real briefly, about when you first started experiencing same-sex attraction, I'll call it, or being attracted to men, and then how that played into your decision of whether or not to go on a mission.
I've always been attracted to men, but it really came to my attention when I was 14, when I was going through some changes and noticed that I was really attracted to men. And because of the For Strength of Youth, basically it says to contact your bishop when you feel this way. So I did, and basically it said, oh, just don't worry, it's not even real. Basically, you just need to keep praying and read your scriptures and keep being strong in the faith, and you'll be fine. So that was basically what I went on my mission with.
Did you try dating women in high school?
I did. I wasn't really interested, didn't even try to kiss anyone or dates like my other guy friends seemed to want to. But so I just went on a few dances, but besides that, I never really got my heart into dating or anything.
Did you ever, if you're comfortable sharing, you don't have to answer this, but did you ever try and date men or have any romantic relationships with men?
Not at that time. I have since.
No, I mean prior to your mission.
Prior to my mission, no. I wouldn't even attempt because something like that would be sinful.
Okay. And did you identify as gay, as you're applying to your mission?
I just applied myself as same-sex attracted. I listed it as something I was versing, but I was doing really well with.
So you put that on your missionary application. Were you tempted to leave that off?
It was definitely an intense decision for sure.
But your bishop knew because you had gone to him.
Right.
So you couldn't have hid it from your bishop.
Right.
So you had to be honest.
Yep.
Okay. So you put that on there. Your bishop knew, but the line that you used, which sounds like it was true, was that it was all under control, that there was no problem. And in your mind, you didn't identify as gay. You just said, I have these feelings, but you'd been led to think that if you go on a mission, it'll all get fixed.
Right.
Okay. So any other things we should know about your application to the mission before you actually went?
I also said that I was prone to depression and that I had taken prescriptions in the past for it.
Okay. So severe depression, just kind of, how would you describe your depression before your mission?
We thought it was like a teenage phase because it got really bad back at the time of puberty, but then it seemed to die off. So we thought maybe it was just a hormonal thing. So we didn't really think it was that bad.
Okay. And, lots of people have depression with no religion involved or without sexuality. Sometimes it can be biological. Maybe it's often biological or there's always a biological component. I just want to make that clear. Having said that, as you look back, do you associate your depression with anything regarding religion or your sexuality?
Later, it would cause a lot of problems. Yeah.
But as you think back to your depression in high school, do you associate the depression in high school with your faith or your suppression of your sexuality, etc.?
Yes.
You do? Okay.
It was. I had to appear perfect.
So perfectionism.
Yeah. And part of that is ignoring your sexuality if you're same-sex attracted.
And looking back, as you think about it, if I had been able to not feel this drive to be perfect all the time and maybe explore dating guys, you think you may have felt differently?
Definitely.
Okay. Well, we're just speculating, but I mean, I think you know you better probably than any of us. So, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So you go into the mission with the history of depression and attracted to men. Anything else about your process that was a problem or, an issue?
Not really. In my patriarchal blessing, it said that I'd be fine, so I didn't try to worry about it too much.
You'd be fine with what?
On my mission, I'd serve honorably and full time, and everything would work out, and I wouldn't miss my family like other missionaries would.
It says that in your patriarchal blessing?
Yeah.
Wow. That adds a little bit. You're not allowed to miss your family now. Okay.
Well, that's part of the reason why I lasted 3 months instead of 1 was because of that line that said, well, you'll serve a full-time mission. You'll be fine.
Yeah. I mean, that sets you up. Okay. So you go to the MTC here in the States?
I went to the MTC in, I think it's Rockwell. It's England.
Okay. So you went to a British MTC.
Yes.
Okay. And when did things Was it awesome at first? When did things start getting hard? Like, tell us about what the mission started to be like for you.
At the MTC, it was a little different because I wasn't even in Utah anymore. I was far away from home, and it was very different for me. So it was just adjusting to that change so quickly that kind of threw me off, and I was really stressed out at first. But by the time I left the MTC, I felt confident and ready to be on my own. And it was after a period of, I think it was 10 days, that I went to my area and got introduced to my trainer. And that was when things really started going downhill.
Okay, so your MTC experience was 3 weeks? Was it 2 weeks, 3 weeks?
2 to 3 weeks. I can't remember how long. It kind of blurred together.
And it was hard, but it was okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so you get your trainer, and what can you tell us about that?
My mission president said that he prayed and got revelation directly so that I would have that trainer and that I would learn a lot from him. What he didn't know was what I would learn from him. But
was he from the States or from the UK?
He's from Arizona.
Okay, stateside. So you had been set up to think that God had chosen this companion specifically for you. How did it not turn out so well?
He physically and emotionally abused me. I endured it for 3 weeks and didn't tell or report to anyone because I thought the Lord wanted me to stay with him.
So you go through 2 or 3 weeks of pretty intense abuse, and you've said to me pre-interview you don't want to get into the abuse, so we won't. We're going to leave it at that. But I'll just ask you, what was that like for you to be experiencing abuse at the hand of your trainer when you thought that God had sent that trainer to you?
It was definitely disconcerting. There would be a lot of mornings I'd wake up and wish I were dead instead of dealing with him for another day. There also came a point where I asked the Lord what I needed to learn a lesson in, because apparently I must be doing something wrong and able for my companion to treat me this way.
So you turned it back on you. The problem must have been you.
Yes.
Okay. That's terrible. I'm so sorry. So you endure that for 3 weeks, and then what happens?
I was in a flat, that's what they call apartments there, with another missionary set, I guess. And he was a district leader, and he started noticing that I started being withdrawn and started noticing weird things, so he reported it to the mission president. And
was the abuse always in private so that no one else would see it?
Yes.
Okay. So no one would have known except by noticing your behavior. So I guess kudos to that district leader for noticing.
Right. Yeah.
Okay. So he reports that something's not right.
Right.
Okay. And then what happened?
And then what the companion did came to light because I then told the mission president what's been going on, because now that he asked me to tell him, that's when I told him what was going on. And it was at that point that he said, "You really should be going home." And I said, "No, I can't. I have to serve full time."
He wanted to send you home at that point?
Yes.
Why was that his reaction versus, let's get rid of this bad missionary and get you a good companion again?
Well, the missionary needed to keep serving his mission too.
But then why not just separate you and give you a different companion? Were you at a point that was so severe that he felt like you couldn't continue as a healthy missionary?
I didn't have the same companion after that point. He wanted to send me home and have the other missionary get trained again so that he could know to not do what he did. But basically what ended up was, instead of me going home, I said, "I'll try a different companion. Maybe it'll get better."
I'm just wondering why his reaction was to send you home at all if you hadn't done anything.
Right.
But did you wonder that?
I didn't understand his process.
You didn't want to go. You didn't want to go home,
Right.
but he wanted to send you home.
But my patriarchal blessing said I'd be there full time and serve a full time honorable mission.
Okay, so you said, I'm not going home. I'm going to stick this out.
Yep.
Okay, so you get a new companion. Then what happens?
I didn't get better.
Meaning what? Meaning what?
I started having nightmares at night, even though I wasn't in danger anymore.
So the trauma, that's a typical PTSD symptom, is re-experiencing the trauma either at night or during the day. Okay.
It got to the point where I could hardly walk even a mile anymore because of how intense everything felt.
Did he offer you a therapist, a psychologist, a psychiatrist?
I got a therapist, and I could only do phone appointments with him because he was in Germany.
Was there a limit to how many you were allowed to have?
It was like once a week with one, and then they kept trying to get me to go to the doctor because they thought it was depression and anxiety.
So they wanted to have you go to a doctor to medicate it.
Right.
How was the German therapist?
It was nice.
Therapist in Germany.
It was nice to talk to him, but really, it was really confusing because we couldn't see each other face to face.
It was just phone? It was just phone?
Yeah.
Okay.
It made it really hard to feel like I could actually get real help.
How many of those calls did you do just over phone? Did you do over phone?
I did 3 before I said, you know what, it's not doing anything for me.
So they weren't. Did you feel like was it a psychologist, a LCSW? Do you know what the credentials were of the person you were talking to?
No, but that was their mission in Germany, was to be a counselor. So I'm guessing they were credentialed.
Okay, so it was someone from America who was a service mission in Germany to be a counselor.
Right.
Okay. And I wonder, did they tell you they were operating under a license in Germany? Because I'm guessing you have to be licensed to practice psychology or therapy.
I honestly have no idea. It was like family services.
LDS Family Services?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so did you feel like those 3, they were competent? Was it just the fact that it was all audio that made it hard, or were you confident in the competence of that therapist?
Basically, it was just like reiterating spiritual stuff. It hardly even felt like real counseling.
So what types of things were said to you?
How often are you reading your scriptures? Are you praying enough? And it basically made me feel like I was guilty for everything my companion did to me because they told me I wasn't doing enough spiritually.
That makes me really sad. So there was no sort of empirically supported PTSD treatment that you were experiencing?
No.
It was more pray, read your scriptures, etc.
Yes.
And that made you feel like you were being sort of blamed. It was your fault for the PTSD symptoms you were experiencing.
Right.
Okay. I'm so sorry. So 3 weeks you ended that. Then what happened?
After that point, I had the second companion for 3 weeks before I said, you know what, this is too much, but I still can't go home yet. Can I try working in the mission office?
Was the new companion bad? Was he abusive?
No. He was the perfect companion. He, instead of being angry about what was happening with me, he was just trying to listen and trying to understand. He wasn't judging. He was just trying to figure out what was going on.
Okay, so it wasn't a companion problem. What was the problem? I could guess, but I'm just going to ask.
It was probably just the lack of therapeutic treatment.
So the ongoing PTSD symptoms that were not being addressed.
Right.
Okay. So you asked to go to the office, then what happened?
I worked there for a few more weeks before I felt I needed to go back to an area to my previous area.
So you started to get better. You started to feel better.
Temporarily,
Okay.
yes.
Okay. All right.
And it was after that point I spent one more week in Bridlington where I solved a couple of problems between my companions because there were two in particular that were having troubles. And my mission president felt that I was well enough that I could go back there and try to help both of them. And in the end, I did help them both out. But then after that point, the symptoms came back again. And finally, in one of my prayers, I felt that it was okay to go home.
So by rejoining sort of the context that you experienced the abuse, the PTSD symptoms returned, and you just realized you weren't going to get better. Was any other, after you discontinued the first therapist, did you say there was a second therapist?
No, it was just the first therapist for 3 times, and he was the only one available.
Okay. And then they tried to get you to get medication. Why did that work? Did it not work? What happened there?
I think it started to work, but
so you went to a doctor and got meds?
Yes.
Was it a competent doctor?
Yes, they were competent.
Okay, and you were prescribed some, SSRIs, some type of...
Yeah, it was an anticyclic, which kind of does both SSRI and SNRI.
Okay. And how was that? I mean, it takes a while for that to kick in, but...
Because I was currently going to the mission home instead of the actual mission when I was taking it, I felt a whole lot better. Okay. So when I went back to the other area, I thought I'd be fine.
Okay, so the meds, you felt like the meds were helping, even though sometimes there's a placebo effect, and we know that there's a delay in that stuff kicking in. But for you, it felt better. But then at some point, it just fell apart, and you prayed. Yes. And felt like you needed to go home. How did your mission president deal with you telling him that you needed to go home? That you felt God's support in you going home?
Well, actually, he was the one asking me to please consider praying about going home because you don't seem like you're doing well.
Okay, so sounds like he sensed from the beginning this just wasn't going to work out for you.
Right.
But you were resisting it because of your patriarchal blessing and your perfectionism and your determination to make it work. Yes. So I'm guessing when you told him you needed to go home, sounds like
he was gung ho.
Okay. And was that okay? Did that feel okay to you to get that support?
I felt okay with him, but the second I'd stop talking to him, the feelings of guilt and inferiority were quite intense.
Okay. So before we talk about you going home, did your feelings of being attracted to men play into any of this time, or?
Yes.
How did they play
in? With the companion, that was perfect. I was also housed with the zone leaders. One of the zone leaders every morning liked to work out naked. And I didn't feel comfortable with that. And so I outright told them, look, I'm same-sex.
No clothes on at all?
None. And he was a previous football player, so he was ripped.
And he's worked push-ups naked with his penis hanging out?
Yep.
I'd never heard of that before.
I didn't feel comfortable with it.
Okay.
At the time. Because I was in missionary mode.
Shouldn't missionaries always be clothed? Were the other missionaries okay with that?
Well, they were the zone leader. No one really talks against them.
Okay. All right. So you told them you were attracted to men.
And I said that I wasn't okay with it. And they said, well, I'm still going to keep working out. So I'll just give you permission as a zone leader to keep sleeping in.
Okay.
So that you don't even have to see me working out.
And he wouldn't just put clothes on?
No.
Okay. That sounds really weird.
Yeah. It was awkward.
Okay. And so any other areas where the same, being attracted to men came into play?
That was the time that I started questioning, because before then I could always just go out and tract or whatever and distract and whatever so that I could push off the question until later. But in the second part of my mission, I couldn't move. So I was basically stuck at the flat all day. And that was when a lot of my gospel doubts started showing up.
Okay. And what were those like?
It didn't make sense that the Lord wanted me to be with someone so abusive as a companion. It also didn't make sense how so many people that could, be in a high position of the church could make so many sins. Like, with the garments, you're basically supposed to keep them on, but he was choosing outright to go against that, and it just the black and white thinking perfectionism I always had of the church started breaking apart on my mission. And the question of, well, are you ever going to be able to marry a woman in the temple came up, and I honestly had no answer for it.
Okay. So things going wrong, leaders disappointing you, then thoughts about being attracted to men and what that meant for your future just started chipping away at your testimony.
Right.
Okay. Did you ever talk to people about that, or did you kind of keep that to yourself?
I told the mission president, but he told me that the whole purpose of life is to get a testimony, and just because you don't have a perfect one doesn't mean you have to go home from a mission for it.
Okay, so he didn't want you going home for that reason.
Right.
Okay, and it sounds like he didn't make you feel awful for your doubts either.
Nope. He
Okay.
was the perfect mission president, all things considered.
Wow. Okay, so you're very happy with your mission president, not so happy with your first companion or your zone leader.
Nope.
Okay. All right. Anything else we need to know about your actual mission before going home, or did we cover the main points?
Those were the main points. It was just everything going home that was interesting.
What do you mean?
A lot of things happened once I came home.
Okay, so you come home. Are you received at the airport?
I was by just family. I felt kind of ashamed that I had to go home early, so I told my parents not to invite anyone else.
Because you felt shamed.
Yeah.
What was that like when your family was there at the airport?
The first thought I had when I saw them was, this is proof that I'm not worthy and I'm not good enough
So seeing
because I didn't do the whole mission.
so seeing your family just reinforced your feelings of shame and worthlessness.
Yep.
Okay, I'm sorry. What happened after that?
I started seeing counselors in family services, which basically was not helpful either. And I went counselor hopping for a while.
To try and treat the PTSD?
Yeah.
Okay.
And finally found the
were
right
they,
one.
what were the ones who weren't doing it right doing wrong? What were they doing wrong?
Basically, they tried to say that if I prayed enough and read the scriptures enough, that everything would just be taken away.
Okay. So the same as the previous
Right.
therapist. And that's the challenge with LDS social services is LDS family services. There may be some competent ones in there, but there's so many that mix religion and what's supposed to be therapy in ways that aren't empirically supported. And so instead of getting the best sort of empirically supported treatment for PTSD, and there are treatments recommended or endorsed by the APA, has been shown empirically efficacious across multiple double-blind, peer-reviewed kind of studies. You're getting people who are mixing religion and folklore with what's supposed to be therapy, and you're not getting the help you need.
Right.
You ultimately found one that was good. Were they with LDS Family Services?
No, but they were Mormon, but they weren't like Nazi Mormon like Utahns tend to be. They were like, I can see how religion can be helpful, but I don't try to incorporate it into what I try to help people with.
Yeah. Okay. And what treatment did he offer?
She did a lot of trauma counseling.
Okay.
It was basically just facing my traumas and getting to a point where I felt confident and wasn't triggered anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. And there are really solid trauma treatments. And that's one of the things you learn in school, grad school, is that people specialize in different areas. And there's going to be no one who's an expert in eating disorders and trauma and depression and OCD and sexuality. And so you go to a specialist. But when the mission has someone who's just a generalist supposing to help everyone across the mission, they're not going to be necessarily competent in all the issues that they would need to treat. And that's another problem with how I think mental health services are with missionaries, it sounds like.
Yeah.
Okay,
That's
so
what I experienced.
how long were you with this competent therapist?
I'm still with her.
Okay.
I'm to the point where I no longer have any nightmares or traumas, but there about a year after I saw her, 2 years ago, I still attempted suicide because of being gay and Mormon didn't mix, and it got to the point where I didn't feel worthwhile as a human being, and it got to the point where I figured, well, no one's going to miss me anyways because I was gay.
So she helped with the PTSD, but then you had to deal with the challenge of being gay and Mormon,
Right.
and it led you to be suicidal.
Yep.
Okay. Before we leave the mission stuff, how were you treated by your bishop, by your stake president, and by your ward, and by your family for coming home early?
For coming home early, my bishops and everyone were really supportive. The thing I didn't like about my ward was they all asked me why I was home early, and it made me feel more guilt and shame.
What did you tell them?
I got sick.
Yeah, and that's the answer, right? I got sick. And did you consider saying I had an abusive companion who physically and emotionally abused me?
No.
This may be obvious, but do you want to share why you weren't comfortable giving more details?
I was uncomfortable because I blamed myself for his abuse.
So you saw it as you. And did that missionary ever get sent home that you know of? Huh?
No. He actually ended up working with another companion, and at the time I went home, I found out he was training another missionary.
So as far as you know, he finished his mission honorably.
Yep.
And there was no consequence you're aware of other than being retrained.
Correct.
Okay. How did that feel?
It validated my feelings that it was my fault and not his.
Okay. I'm so sorry. So, people asking you why your home early was bad. What else? Anything else was hard about your leaders or your family or the ward or friends?
It got a lot worse when I started actually full on questioning my same-sex attraction. And it got to the point where I was like, you know what, I'm gay, but I don't know what to do with it. And it was at that point that my bishops were like, well, now you can't have a temple recommend, and now you can't take the sacrament, and you're not worthy anymore.
Was that because you were starting to experiment with being gay, with relationships with other men, or just because you're having the feelings?
The feelings.
Okay, so you were just having the feelings, and they took your temple recommend away for having the feelings?
Yes.
Now, as I understood it, the church had the position now that it's not a sin to have those feelings. It's only a sin if you act on them.
Right. That's not what happened with me, with the way my bishop interpreted things.
So he takes away your ability to go to the temple just for saying you're having the feelings?
Yep.
They're not going away.
Mm-hmm.
What was that like in your relationship with God as you're struggling with these feelings and the bishop's involved and you're trying to figure it all out?
Instead of God being like a counselor and someone that cared for me, he became my jailer and basically the devil. I didn't feel like I was loved. I didn't feel like I was worthy of love because I was gay. I didn't feel worthwhile as a person.
Did you ask God to help you? To try and take it away from you?
Several times.
What was that like?
I just felt more suicidal, so I kind of felt like he just wanted me to kill myself.
What were the ways you tried to change?
Lots of prayer, lots of scripture study, lots of research on things against homosexuality and about it being a choice rather than something you're born with. A lot of basically online conversion therapy.
Where was that coming from?
They were from sources from people that were LDS counselors. I just searched them on Google.
How much were you paying for the online conversion therapy?
It didn't cost anything. I was just reading articles.
Oh, okay. You're reading articles, and these were links provided by your LDS Family Services therapists. Is that right?
Basically, yeah.
Were there any support groups? What are some of the are the websites things we would be familiar with?
Northstar. That was the first one.
So you got connected to Northstar.
Yeah.
And what was that like?
I felt like it was a competition to see who could be the most righteous whenever I went on there, and I would get support, but it was like pious support. Like, look at how good I'm doing, so now you can learn from my example because I'm perfect.
Was this a Facebook group?
It was meant to be a support group, but there were so many rules in place because we couldn't talk about sex when really that was the problem. That it got to the point where it didn't even feel good going there because it felt dangerous as an environment.
The Facebook group, you mean?
Yeah.
Did you go to any face-to-face meetings with Northstar people?
After the way the Facebook group was, I didn't want to.
Okay. And is this something, was Ty Mansfield involved in all this?
Was what?
Ty Mansfield, was he involved in all this, the leader of Northstar? Is that a name that even means anything to you?
It sounds familiar.
But he wasn't a prominent person in your questions and seeking help?
Not yet. Or at least I didn't notice.
Okay. So how long did you try and go to Northstar and get support there?
A few months before I left, and found Affirmation instead.
Okay, and then you went to Affirmation. Any other resources? Did you look at the book Voices of Hope that Deseret Book sells?
I heard about it, but thankfully by the time I heard about it, I was in Affirmation and heard from a lot of people that it only made them feel guilt instead of healing.
Okay, so was Northstar the main source of trying to change or, suppress your sexuality or whatever?
Yeah.
Okay, so Affirmation, what was that like for you?
It was a lot different because I did the group that basically Affirmation Journeys, where it isn't like trying to make you leave the church, but it's like being more open so that if you wanted to discuss things like that, they would be honest and say, how they felt since they left or how other members have felt since they, don't associate with the church but still follow the precepts that she teaches.
Okay. And that felt what to you?
It felt hopeful. It got to a point where I felt a different connection with God than I had before. And it didn't even necessarily had to be connected with the Mormon church. I just felt that God loved me and that the feelings of God not loving me is the result of religion, and it isn't true. Because God loves no matter what. And if you're in a religion where God makes you feel unloved, it's not God.
So Affirmation helped give you the freedom to reconsider what God was for you, and for you, God has to be accepting, not rejecting of who you are.
Yes.
Okay. And was that an important part of your healing?
Yes. It started getting me to the point where I started realizing that the companion abusing me was not my fault.
Now I'm starting to wonder if for you there was a parallel between an abusive companion and sort of an abusive God slash church in your mind. I'm not saying the church was abusive necessarily, but I can't help but think you would sort of end up drawing a connection between the abusive companion and a church and a God that you probably experienced as abusive.
Yeah.
Was that an important connection for you to make?
Yeah. Once I started feeling that way, I started healing. And since realizing that I haven't been suicidal, it's been very helpful to make those connections and realize that, you know, you don't have to be part of a church and able to experience God's love and help and support for his children. And that after I learned about what the church did in Prop 8, I left the church at that point, took my own name out. And then it wasn't soon after that the new policy came out, and it only proved to me what I already found out was that the church isn't really true for me, at least.
Powerful. So, okay. So that, and now you're saying that your feelings of suicidality, what?
They're gone.
They're gone. And the PTSD symptoms that you were suffering from?
I still get triggered every now and then, but I know how to deal with it, and I don't shame myself for it anymore.
Okay. And the depression and that kind of stuff that was having a grip on you before?
It's a lifelong struggle. It usually comes up in your 20s, is usually the age it comes out, and it is something you have to deal with lifelong. But I'm still capable, and I am currently going to the U of U to get a degree in social work, and I am managing it.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
That's exciting. Okay. So, I guess to kind of ask some of these closing questions, and you can tell me, is there anything else about your mission that you would want to tell me, or your experience, or do you feel like we've pretty much covered the main points of your experience?
We covered the main points.
Okay.
Yeah.
So now we can jump to kind of the closing questions I've been asking everyone. So, was there anything, if you were to give the church suggestions about how to deal with someone in your situation, let's just say prior to the mission, is there anything that the church could do differently to deal with how you were up until the point where you actually left for your mission? Any feedback or suggestions?
I just didn't like how helpless I felt to the same-sex attraction thing. They just said, push it off, it really doesn't matter. And really it ended up being something that really does matter later on. Okay,
so don't downplay your attraction to men and making the missionary feel like everything's going to be fine.
Right.
How about that patriarchal blessing?
That patriarchal blessing, man, I took it so literally and like it was a fortune. I really kind of wish my patriarch wasn't that specific, because it ended up hurting me so much more.
How about the culture of perfectionism that you were swimming in prior to your mission?
That would also, it doesn't do anyone any good. It doesn't make you more righteous. All it does is add more shaming to the church, and that's a devil tactic, not a God one.
Okay. So ramp down the perfectionism and the pressure, ramp down the specificity and patriarchal blessings, ramp up the education and concern about matters of sexuality.
Yes.
For prospective missionaries. How about how everything, your faith crisis, your sexuality, your trauma, your mental health services, what about how those were for you while you were on your mission? Any suggestions you have there?
One, if you have an abusive companion, he should go home. He shouldn't be on the mission anymore. That's enough for me to say not just a justice thing, but what about the other missionaries he was with? How many other people did he torment before finally going home because it was his 2 years? Because I know the mission is supposed to be a challenging time, but if you're allowing abusers to stay there, no wonder it's going to be hard.
Okay.
And the other one is have the counselors actually do therapy. I mean, you shouldn't have to say that, but all they did was talk about how my relationship with God was. They did not do any therapy whatsoever.
So have competent therapists that provide empirically supported treatments that match the presenting concerns.
Yes.
Okay. How about how your mission president dealt with it? Just you and going home and everything else. Anything else about how your mission president dealt with it?
I liked how he did it. Even though my feelings of shame kind of overrode everything, he did take the time to sit down with me and say, you are still worthwhile. It's okay that you had to go home. This was outside of your control. You just have to take care of yourself.
Okay, good job to the mission president for that. It sounds like you had a good companion or two as well.
Yeah.
How about for APs that want to exercise naked? Any feedback there?
Well, now that I'm gay, I'm kind of like, well, but
more of that. No.
I'm kidding about that. Honestly, if they're going to be a missionary, they can't do it halfway. They need to follow all the rules.
Okay.
It makes it easier for all the other missionaries there.
Okay. How about how your leadership or the ward members or your family handled things with you coming home? Any feedback there?
My family was really great. They kept supporting me and kept reminding me that I was awesome and that I served honorably. And the mission, how the ward could have done better is instead of coming up to me and asking me questions, to just come up to me and say, I am so glad you're back, and give me a hug. That's really the best thing you can do.
That's brilliant.
It's just show support, not curiosity. I mean, we're all curious, but if you just wait until they heal and if they want to talk about it, they'll talk about it. But it really isn't in your place to know. All you need to do is show support.
So just love them and be excited they're home.
Yep.
And don't ask a bunch of questions.
Yep.
Okay. Your ward leadership, stake leadership, did they handle things okay?
I wish they wouldn't have put so much shame on me for having my feelings that I did. And because ultimately it made me feel unloved and unsupported and like I didn't matter, and that led up to my attempted suicide.
So the messages about same-sex sexuality were damaging to you?
Yes.
So that's a message to the broader church. So what's your message to the church about its policies around same-sex sexuality?
I think as long as they're going to continue doing that, people are going to question rightfully about the church, because that is something of the devil. We all make our decisions, and we can all follow the precepts of our own conscience and worship God how, where, what we may. And them doing that is putting a line in the ground that adds contention, which is something not of God. And I think people are going to keep questioning the church until, things change.
Okay. So basically a 360-degree condemnation of the church's policies for LGBT people.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So let's say there's a young gay man or lesbian woman or LGBT person who's considering a mission. What would you say to them?
Honestly, it depends on their conviction, because even though it ended up being a lot of confusion for me later, I did help a lot of people on my mission. And it wasn't even through spiritual. I did a lot of service. I did a lot of helping people. And that was part of what made me realize I wanted to be a social worker, was I got the opportunity to serve. So as long as they were okay with preaching the gospel as well and could deal with it for 2 years and just hold off the question until they came back, I think that would work. But if they really had a lot of doubts, I would question them. I would tell them to question it and find out the answers before they went, because you can wait until you're 26 to go. There's no rush. And yeah.
So going on the mission with a lot of uncertainty, you don't recommend, because why?
Because it makes your mission a whole lot harder when it gets to the point where you can't preach the religion anymore. And if you can't preach the religion, people are going to start shaming you for it because you're supposed to be a missionary. So if you wanted to do a service mission, that's also possible. You don't have to do a religious thing. But if you want to have the most out of your experience, you shouldn't have any big doubts before you go.
And can you see, and just a question that comes to my mind is, I can see a missionary saying, nope, I'm good. I've put that sexuality behind me. I'm 100% convinced. Does that mean that because they entered the mission convinced that the mission's going to be great for them too?
Not necessarily. There are lots of struggles that come from being on a mission. That's the way I was when I went on my mission, and this is what happened to me. So honestly, there are some things you can only learn through experience.
Okay. So it sounds like no matter what, you're saying it's a really fraught thing to go on a mission if you're attracted to the same sex.
Yep.
But you're not, to your credit, you're not telling everyone not to do it. You're just saying, man, be super careful.
Right.
Okay. Let's say there's someone on their mission who's either doubting or struggling with their sexuality or struggling with the church's policies about sexuality. What would you tell that missionary?
Honestly, it depends on the person. If you go home unworthily, you have to pay for the plane ticket home. And that can be a way of trapping some missionaries into their missions now, is they have to pay for the plane ticket home if it's unworthy. And honestly, I just tell them to follow what their heart says. And if they feel they need to stay, to focus on preaching on things that you agree with, like serving others. I still think that's a great thing. Honesty, doing good to others, and having good faith so that you aren't overly negative all the time, things like that. If you can preach about things like that, then go for it. But if you honestly don't feel comfortable with giving a lesson on something, then you really shouldn't teach it.
But our mission's set up to where you can just not teach the lessons, but just teach about love and kindness. Is that how mission's set up?
Well, you have a companion.
So just let the companion do the teaching?
Yep.
Okay.
And you'll probably get some flack for it, but if you have to stay, at least stay true to your true values.
So don't sacrifice your core values.
Right.
Okay. What about someone who... what about just LGBT members of the church who are still believing or still possibly believing? What advice do you have to them?
To know that God loves them no matter what, and to let them know that I, as their friend, would always be there. And I have a lot of Mormon friends that are same-sex attracted that I still help out. And I just make sure you have a friend that you can be honest to and can say everything to, so you don't bottle up any feelings.
And as it relates to kind of staying in the church or out of the church?
They really need to follow their own path. For me, my path of finding my own personal freedom and happiness was leaving. But for some people, the church really does provide a comfort, and they need to keep that.
Okay. Looking back, do you regret going on a mission?
Yes and no. I regret that I didn't stand up for myself. I regret that I kind of let people walk all over me because of my patriarchal blessing, basically. And what I don't regret, though, is since this happened, I've gotten a lot better and have found a way of life that's a lot better for me and didn't have to end up with me lying to a girl in the temple and then getting divorced later because I was gay anyways.
So you're glad. One positive result is that it's helped you come to accept yourself, so you didn't have to make more possibly damaging decisions later.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, so far everyone I've interviewed has said they still learned a lot of good things and they're not sure they would have not gone. Okay. Well, great. Well, Mike, this has been a super moving interview for me. I think you've been really thoughtful and fair and courageous, and I can't thank you enough for coming on. Would you mind sharing just your final testimony? And that doesn't mean a Mormon testimony. It doesn't even have to be religious. Just what are some truths that you live by now, or some perspectives of hope, or whatever that you want to share with listeners?
The biggest ones for me is that God loves everyone. He's like the great counselor. He truly cares for everyone. And no matter where you're at, he's going to help you. Even if you're sinning, he's still going to help you. And, he's not the God that Mormons portray. He helps us where we're at. He understands where we're at. And he doesn't judge us for it. I also believe that religion can be there to help people coexist as long as it isn't used too much. And I think that's a good thing. And I also strongly believe in service and helping others and being honest, kind. I think the church has a lot of great things, but a lot of negative too. And if it just ends up being too negative for you, I'd suggest that you prayerfully consider moving out. When I got the answer to do that, it was hard at first, but it ended up getting a lot of hope for me later. And no matter what, if you're struggling, there will be better times ahead. You do not need to go to suicide to make things better. In fact, it would have made it so that I couldn't have faced the problems like I was able to. So I'm glad that everything worked out, and I'm glad I got a second chance.
Beautiful. All right, Mike Woodruff, thank you so much for joining us on Mormon Stories.
All right, thank you.
And for our listeners, please join us at mormonstories.org. If there are comments you want to make, if you have questions for Mike, if you want to show Mike your support, if you're a hater, don't even bother putting any comments on there. I'll delete them if I see them. I want to thank everyone who financially supports Mormon Stories to make this podcast possible. Donations are always in flux, and we rely on the donations to survive. So if anybody wants to see Mormon Stories continue, please consider becoming a monthly subscriber. That's how we make this possible. All your donations are tax deductible. And they go to a nonprofit that has accountants and oversight, full financial transparency. And all we're doing is trying to help people like this missionary series. And we'll do it as long as people are willing to support us. So thanks to the listeners. Thanks to you, Mike. And we have several more interviews in store on this series. So please check back and for several more really compelling stories. All right, Mike, take care. Thanks so much.
All right, you too.
Okay, bye.
Bye.